Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
The whole mess started when our team lead suggested we all go out for dinner to celebrate closing a big client deal. At first, I wasn't going to join because these work dinners usually end up being expensive, but everyone kept insisting I come along. They said it would be fun and that we all deserved to unwind after the crazy week we'd had. The restaurant they picked was this trendy place downtown that I'd never been to before. Looking at the menu, I could already tell this was going to cost more than my usual takeout dinner, but I figured I'd just order something reasonable and call it a team-building expense. We sat at a big round table, 8 of us total. Right away, I noticed people were getting excited about the menu, talking about sharing appetizers and ordering bottles of wine. I kept my mouth shut and studied the menu, looking for something that wouldn't break my budget. When the waiter came around, the ordering started. First guy ordered a seafood platter appetizer, lobster pasta, and a craft cocktail. Second person got calamari to share, filet mignon, dessert, and 2 glasses of wine. It went on like this around the table. Everyone was treating it like some kind of feast. When it got to me, I ordered a chicken pasta dish and a soda. That was it. The waiter looked at me like I was forgetting something, but I just smiled and said that was all. My coworker sitting next to me leaned over and asked if that was really all I was getting. She told me to live a little and suggested I get an appetizer or something. I politely told her I was good with my choice. The food came out in waves. First the appetizers, 3 different ones that everyone was sharing, then the main courses, then desserts for most of the table. People were drinking wine, cocktails, you name it. I ate my chicken pasta and drank my soda, and honestly, I was perfectly happy with my choice. The conversation was actually pretty fun. We talked about work, shared some funny stories, and I was glad I decided to come. For a while, I forgot all about the money aspect and just enjoyed hanging out with my coworkers outside the office. But then the bill came. The waiter set it down in the middle of the table, and I could see it was pretty thick with all the itemized charges. One of my coworkers grabbed it first and his eyes went wide. He announced that the total was $412, which would be about $52 each if we split it evenly. My stomach dropped. $52. I had spent exactly $32 including tax. I did the math quickly in my head. They wanted me to pay an extra $20 for food and drinks I didn't even touch. I spoke up and said I would just pay for what I ordered instead. The table got quiet. A few people looked at me like I'd just said something inappropriate. Our team lead dismissed my concern and said it was easier to split evenly, claiming that's what adults do. I explained that I understood but had only spent $32, so paying $52 didn't seem fair. Karen chimed in, insisting that the fun was in sharing and that was the whole point of going out together. I pointed out that I hadn't shared in the appetizers or drinks, just had my pasta and soda. Another coworker accused me of being really cheap, saying it was only $20 extra. I explained that $20 might not seem like much to them, but it mattered to me, and that I had ordered conservatively on purpose. Karen called the situation embarrassing and said we were all professionals. The atmosphere at the table had completely changed. People were looking uncomfortable, some were whispering to each other. I felt like I was being judged for not wanting to subsidize everyone else's expensive meal. I tried to explain that I wasn't trying to ruin anyone's night and just wanted to pay for what I consumed. I even offered to leave a good tip on my portion. The team lead brushed me off, telling me to do whatever I wanted but calling the whole thing really awkward. I pulled out my wallet, counted out $40, enough to cover my meal, tax, and a good tip, and put it on the table. Then I stood up, thanked them for inviting me, said I had enjoyed the conversation, and told them I'd see them Monday before walking out. I left feeling like everyone was staring at me. The whole drive home I kept replaying the scene in my head, wondering if I'd handled it wrong. Monday morning at the office was weird. A few people who had been at the dinner barely acknowledged me. Karen made the point of talking loudly about how some people don't understand social norms when I walked past her desk. Another coworker cornered me by the coffee machine and told me I had really killed the mood Friday night. He said that after I left, everyone was talking about how uncomfortable I had made it. I asked how I had made it uncomfortable when I was the one being asked to pay for food I didn't eat. He lectured me that adults know how to split a bill without making a scene and called it being part of a team. I shot back that being part of a team didn't mean I had to pay for his lobster dinner. Apparently, my response got back to our manager, who called me into her office Tuesday afternoon. I was prepared for a lecture about team dynamics, but instead she surprised me. She told me she had heard about what happened at dinner and wanted me to know that I had handled it appropriately. She mentioned that she had actually gotten complaints before about these work dinners where people felt pressured to overspend. I was shocked and asked if she was serious. She confirmed it and explained that she was implementing a new policy. If the team wanted to do group dinners, they would either set a per-person budget ahead of time or people would pay for their own orders. No more splitting everything evenly. By Wednesday, word had gotten around the office about the new policy. Suddenly, 3 other co-workers approached me privately to thank me for standing up to the dinner splitting situation. Turns out I wasn't the only one who had felt pressured to overpay at these group outings. Karen was not happy about the policy change. She made several snide comments throughout the week about people who can't afford to socialize with their colleagues. But her complaints fell on deaf ears, especially after the manager sent out an email explaining that work social events should be inclusive and not create financial pressure for anyone. Karen suggested another team dinner the following Friday. This time, the manager insisted everyone look at the menu ahead of time and agree on a per-person spending limit of $35. Karen suddenly wasn't interested in going out anymore. I started doing calisthenics a couple of years ago. It began when I couldn't afford a gym membership in college and had to find ways to stay in shape using just my body weight. I fell in love with the discipline, the progression, and honestly, the way it made me feel about myself. After graduation, I finally got a decent job and could afford to join a proper gym. I still preferred body weight exercises, but the gym had better space and equipment for my routines. Plus, having mirrors helped me check my form. The gym I joined was pretty popular with college students since it was close to campus. I usually went in the evenings after work, around the same time most students finished their classes. I kept to myself mostly, did my routines, and went home. I've been going there for about 6 months when this whole mess started. There was this guy who seemed to think he owned the place. He was probably in his early 20s, always wore tank tops that showed off his arms, and had this attitude like everyone should be impressed by him. He'd grunt loudly during his lifts, slam weights around, and generally act like the gym was his personal stage. The thing is, he wasn't even that strong. I mean, he was fit, sure, but nothing special. He just acted like he was some kind of fitness god. I noticed he always seemed to be trying to get attention from the women at the gym, especially this one girl who came in around the same time we did. She was friendly to everyone but clearly wasn't interested in him romantically. One evening I was doing my usual routine in the stretching area. I'd worked up to doing handstand push-ups against the wall, which took me months to master. It's not about showing off, it's just part of my progression. You start with regular push-ups, then elevated feet push-ups, then pike push-ups, and eventually handstand push-ups. It's a natural advancement. I was about halfway through my set when I heard some people talking nearby. One of the girls complimented my handstand push-ups and asked how long it took me to learn them. I finished my rep and came down from the handstand. I thanked her and told her it took about 8 months to build up to it, starting with wall walks and gradually working on the strength. Another girl said it looked really cool and mentioned she could barely do regular push-ups. I told her everyone starts somewhere and that the key is just being consistent. We chatted for a few minutes about calisthenics and different progressions. They seemed genuinely interested in learning, so I explained some beginner movements they could try. It was a normal, friendly conversation. That's when the tank top guy showed up. He interrupted our conversation and told the ladies they didn't need to waste time with party tricks. He claimed real strength comes from real weights. The girls looked uncomfortable, I just nodded politely and went back to my routine. I had a few more sets to finish. One of the girls said they were actually interested in learning some bodyweight exercises. The tank top guy insisted that he'd been lifting for 4 years and knew what real fitness looked like. I ignored him and set up for another handstand. When I kicked up into position, I could hear him getting louder. He started saying I was just showing off for attention and that real athletes don't need to do circus tricks. I came down and turned to face him. I told him I was just doing my workout and not trying to bother anyone. He sarcastically said sure, and that it just happened to be right where everyone could see me. I explained that this was the stretching area where bodyweight exercises are supposed to be done. One of the girls backed me up saying they had asked me about it and that I wasn't showing off. The tank top guy asked if she was defending me now. The girl he'd been trying to impress told him he was being weird and to just let people work out. That seemed to set him off. His face got red and he stepped closer to me. He asked if I thought I was so special with my gymnastics routine and if I thought I was better than everyone else. I told him I didn't want any trouble and was just trying to finish my workout. I turned around and set up for another handstand. Big mistake. When I was upside down, balanced on my hands, I felt a sudden, crushing pain in my stomach. The punch knocked all the air out of my lungs and sent me crashing to the floor. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, just pure pain radiating through my core. The girl started screaming. I was curled up on the ground, gasping for air, when I heard footsteps running over. A gym staff member rushed over and asked what happened. One of the girls yelled that the tank top guy had punched me while I was doing a handstand. The girl he'd been trying to impress asked if I was okay. I was still trying to catch my breath. The pain was intense, and I was worried he might have done some real damage. The gym staff member told the tank top guy he needed to come with him right away. The tank top guy protested, saying I was asking for it and acting all high and mighty. The staff member said he had attacked another member, and they were calling the police. The tank top guy freaked out and said no way, claiming it was just a little push. One of the girls shouted that he had punched me in the stomach while I was upside down and that everyone saw it. More staff members arrived, including the manager. They helped me sit up and asked if I needed medical attention. I was starting to breathe normally again, but my abs felt like they were on fire. The manager announced they had security cameras throughout the gym and would be reviewing the footage and cooperating fully with police. The tank top guy said this was ridiculous and that they were going to ruin his life over some show-off. His crush told him he was disgusting and that she never wanted to see him again. The police arrived about 10 minutes later. 2 officers took statements from everyone who witnessed what happened. The girls, other gym members, and staff all confirmed the same story. One officer arrested the tank top guy for assault and read him his rights. Even while being arrested, the tank top guy couldn't stop making it worse for himself. He kept ranting about how I was hogging all the attention and deserved what happened. The second officer asked if I wanted to press charges. I said absolutely, explaining that he could have seriously injured me. The officer told me I'd need to come to the station to file a formal report. The manager pulled me aside when they were taking the tank top guy away. He said they were banning him permanently from all their locations because this kind of behavior was completely unacceptable. He also offered me a free month membership for what I went through. I thanked him and said I appreciated that. I ended up going to the hospital that night just to make sure nothing was damaged internally. Thankfully, it was just bruising, but it could have been much worse if I'd landed wrong when I fell. The court case was pretty straightforward. The security footage clearly showed him walking up behind me and delivering a deliberate punch while I was in a vulnerable position. Multiple witnesses testified, and his own statements to police where he admitted to hitting me because he was jealous sealed the deal. He was convicted of assault and ordered to pay my medical bills plus damages. He also got community service and had to attend anger management classes. Word spread around the local fitness community about what happened. His reputation was completely ruined. The girl he'd been trying to impress made sure everyone knew what kind of person he really was. He ended up having to find gyms in other parts of town because nobody wanted him around, and I kept doing my handstand push-ups. I lost most of my hearing in my left ear after a construction accident 2 years ago. Getting hearing aids changed my life completely. I can finally participate in conversations again, and most importantly, I can hear safety warnings on job sites. These devices cost me $6,000 total, and my insurance only covered half. My friend group knows about my hearing loss. When I take the aids out at home, they just speak up a bit so I can follow along. It's never been a big deal, and they've all been super supportive. There's this person my friends bring around sometimes. They're on the autism spectrum but high functioning. They drive themselves places, live in their own apartment, have a steady job at a grocery store, and seem to get along fine with everyone. I don't have any problem with autistic people at all, but this person has one habit that drives me absolutely crazy. They burp. Not just regular burps, but these loud, forced ones that smell terrible. And they do it right in people's faces like it's funny. I have a really sensitive nose, and the smell makes me gag. I don't mind if someone burps naturally and says, "Excuse me," but this feels deliberate and gross. The first few times they hung out with us, I tried to be polite about it. When they'd lean over and let out one of these nasty burps right near my face, I'd just move away or make a face. But it kept happening. I pulled them aside and explained nicely that the burping bothered me, especially when they did it so close to me. I asked if they could maybe not do that when they were right next to me because it was pretty strong and I have a sensitive nose. They apologized and said they forget sometimes, but nothing changed. They kept doing it during meals, when we were sitting close watching movies, even when they were talking directly to me. I brought it up again a few weeks later, reminding them about what I'd asked before and that it was still bothering me when they did it right in my face. Again, they apologized and said they don't always realize they're doing it. My friends started giving me looks like I was being mean, but I felt like I was being reasonable. If someone can hold down a job and maintain friendships, they should be able to control when and where they burp, right? Things came to a head last month when I decided to host a dinner party. I've been planning it for weeks, making homemade pasta and garlic bread. I invited my usual friend group and told them they could bring anyone they wanted. When they showed up with their friend, I welcomed them warmly and invited them in, mentioning that dinner was almost ready. They thanked me for having them over and complimented how amazing everything smelled. About 20 minutes later, I excused myself to use the bathroom. When I came back out, I was going to call everyone to the dining room since the food was ready. But first, I needed to grab my hearing aids from my bedroom. I have this special drying case for them since moisture can damage the electronics. It was raining that day, so I put them in there when I got home from work. When I walked into my room, I saw something that made my stomach drop. They were sitting on my bed with both of my hearing aids in their ears, pressing buttons on them and making faces like they were testing different settings. I demanded to know what they were doing and told them to put the hearing aids down immediately. They casually explained that they thought the devices were cool and were just seeing how they work. I felt my blood pressure spike. These aren't toys. They're medical devices that cost $3,000 each. Having someone else's earwax and bacteria all over them is disgusting, and they could easily break them by messing with the settings. I told them that those were medical devices, not toys, and I needed them to remove the hearing aids immediately. Instead of apologizing and taking them out, they laughed and let out one of their signature burps right in my direction. The smell hit me, and I actually gagged. Then they said oops and apologized, but immediately offered to give me a hug to make up for it. They started to stand up while still wearing my hearing aids, reaching toward me with their arms out. I stepped back quickly and told them no, to just take out the hearing aids and not touch me. That's when disaster struck. When they were fumbling to remove the hearing aids, they dropped my left one. It hit my hardwood floor with a sickening crack. At the same time, they knocked over the glass of wine they'd brought into my bedroom without asking, and the liquid started spreading toward where my hearing aid had fallen. I dove down and grabbed it just before the wine reached it, but I could see a small crack in the casing. They immediately started apologizing, saying it was an accident and they were so sorry. I told them to get out of my room right away. By this time, my friends had come looking for us and saw the commotion. My best friend asked what was going on in there. I explained that they had been wearing my hearing aids without permission and had just dropped one on the floor. I emphasized that these cost $3,000 each and that I literally need them to function. My other friend jumped to their defense, saying that I should know they have trouble reading social situations sometimes and probably didn't realize it was a big deal. That's when I lost it completely. I told them I didn't care about any of that. I said I'm allowed to decide what I put up with in my personal space and who gets to handle my medical devices. I pointed out that anyone who can hold down a job, make friends, and live independently should be able to respect basic boundaries. I made it clear that being on the autism spectrum doesn't give someone a free pass to ignore what I'm comfortable with. The room went silent. They were still holding my right hearing aid, looking like they were about to cry. My best friend said I was being pretty harsh and that they didn't mean any harm. I asked if intent really mattered when someone damages my property. I challenged them by asking if they would let a random person play with their prescription, glasses, or insulin pump just because they were curious. They offered to pay to fix the hearing aid if it was broken, but I pointed out the reality of trying to cover this cost on a grocery store salary, explaining that these devices cost more than most people's monthly rent. My friends exchanged looks and started gathering their things. My best friend announced that they thought they should go and accused me of being really unfair. I asked how I was being unfair in my own home, but they were already heading for the door. They all left without eating the dinner I'd spent hours preparing. I was furious and hurt that my friends took their side instead of supporting me. The next morning, my best friend sent me a text saying I had really embarrassed them the night before and that they were crying in the car afterward. I responded by explaining that I was having a panic attack, thinking about how I'd afford new hearing aids if mine were broken. I asked why their comfort was more important than my boundaries. My friend insisted I could have handled it better and that they don't always understand social rules. I shot back that maybe they shouldn't be touching other people's medical equipment without asking them. We went back and forth for days. My friend kept insisting I was being ableist and should apologize. I kept explaining that having autism doesn't mean someone gets to ignore boundaries, especially involving expensive medical devices. I told my friend I was done arguing about it. If they thought it was okay for someone to handle my hearing aids without permission, burp in my face repeatedly after being asked to stop, and then expect me to just accept it all with a smile, then we clearly had very different ideas about respect and friendship. I never did get an apology. My friend group split over the incident, with half of them thinking I was right to set boundaries and the other half believing I was too harsh. The person with autism started avoiding events where I might be present, which honestly was fine with me. 3 weeks later, I ran into them at the grocery store where they work. They were at the customer service counter when I walked up to return something. The moment they saw me, their whole attitude changed. They got this smug look on their face and started talking loudly to their co-worker about how some people think they're better than others just because they have expensive stuff. I ignored the obvious jab and handed over my receipt for the return. They processed it while making snide comments about how uptight some customers can be. When they handed me my refund, they made sure to burp loudly right as I reached for the money. But karma works in mysterious ways. Their manager had been standing right behind them during this whole performance. Apparently, deliberately burping at customers violates the store's professionalism policy. The manager pulled them aside immediately after I left. I heard through mutual friends that they got written up and had to attend additional training about appropriate workplace behavior. They also had to personally apologize to me in writing as part of their disciplinary action. The letter arrived a week later. It was clearly written under duress, but it acknowledged that they had been inappropriate both at my house and at their workplace. They admitted that being on the spectrum wasn't an excuse for ignoring boundaries or being disrespectful to others. I never responded to the letter, but I did keep it. Every Wednesday, I have to make a grocery run during my lunch break. It's always chaos at the store because it's right in the middle of the business district and everyone's trying to squeeze their shopping into that same 1-hour window. Yesterday was brutal. The temperature was hitting 95 degrees and the asphalt in the parking lot was practically melting. I've been circling the packed lot for 10 minutes, watching other people snag spots while I kept missing them by seconds. My lunch break was ticking away, and I still had a whole list of things to grab for dinner that night. Finally, I spotted a car with its reverse lights on near the front entrance. Perfect timing. I pulled up behind it, put on my turn signal, and waited patiently while the driver loaded their groceries and got settled. The spot was maybe 20 feet from the store entrance, which was going to be a lifesaver in this heat. The car backed out slowly and I pulled forward into the spot when it was clear. I was already reaching for my reusable bags when I heard a loud honk behind me. In my rearview mirror, I could see a huge pickup truck blocking the lane. The driver was gesturing angrily at me through his windshield. I figured he was just impatient and would drive around me, but instead he parked right behind my car and got out. This guy was probably in his 40s, wearing a polo shirt that was way too tight, and he was already red in the face before he even started talking. He walked up to my window and demanded that I move my car immediately. When I asked him what he was talking about, he yelled that the spot was his because he'd been watching it for a while. He said he needed it since it was close to the door and he didn't want to walk in the heat. I looked around the parking lot and saw there were other spots available just further back toward the street. I told him I was sorry, but I had been there first since I waited for the car to back out and pulled right in. He got even angrier and said it didn't matter because he had seen the spot first. He demanded that I move so he wouldn't have to park way out in the back of the lot. He pointed toward the far end like it was some kind of terrible punishment, even though we were only talking about maybe an extra 100 feet of walking. I told him that's not how parking works and that it's first come, first served. I grabbed my bags and started walking toward the store, hoping he'd just give up and find another spot. But he followed me. He kept shouting that I couldn't just steal someone's parking spot and threatened to call security. I told him to go ahead, figuring that would be the end of it. What was security going to do? Tell me I had to move because some guy claimed he'd been watching a public parking space. I was about halfway through my shopping when I saw the security guard walking through the produce section. He looked like he was in his 60s, wearing a uniform that had seen better days and carrying a cup of coffee like it was the only thing keeping him going. The guard asked if I was the person with the blue sedan. When I confirmed I was, he explained that someone was complaining about a parking situation and asked me to come outside with him. When we got back to the parking lot, the guy in the pickup was standing next to my car with his arms crossed. His truck was still blocking the lane behind me. The security guard asked what the problem was. The angry guy immediately started complaining that I had stolen his parking spot and that he was waiting for it first. The guard asked him if he had been actively waiting behind the car that was leaving. The guy admitted he wasn't, but insisted he had seen the spot first while driving around looking for parking. He said he had spotted it and knew it was about to open up. The security guard then asked me if I had been waiting behind the car when it backed out. I confirmed that I was with my turn signal on the whole time. The guard walked over to a light pole that had a security camera mounted on top. He said he wanted to check the footage and pulled out his phone. Apparently, he had some kind of app that let him access the camera system. After about 2 minutes, he looked up and shook his head. He told me I was completely in the right since I had been positioned behind the departing vehicle with my signal on. He confirmed that the other guy was nowhere near the spot when I claimed it. The angry guy protested that it wasn't fair and that he needed the spot more than I did. The security guard told me not to worry about him and explained that this guy pulls the same stunt all the time. He mentioned that just last month, the same person tried to convince him that someone stole his spot because he had been planning to park there. The security guard took a long sip of his coffee and looked at the guy like he was dealing with a toddler having a tantrum. The guy started ranting about how ridiculous the whole situation was and how he didn't understand customer service. He bragged about being a regular customer who shops there all the time. The guard told him he needed to move his truck because he was blocking traffic. The guy said fine but kept complaining that everything was unfair and that I should have to move my car. The security guard told him that wasn't going to happen. The guy stormed back to his truck, still yelling about how unfair everything was. When he drove away, I could see him gesturing wildly through his windshield. True to the security guard's word, He ended up having to park in the very back corner of the lot. The guard apologized for the trouble and said some people think the world revolves around them. I thanked him for checking the cameras and admitted I was starting to wonder if I was going crazy. He told me I had done everything right and called the other guy a regular pain in his rear end. When I walked back into the store, I could see the guy trudging across the hot asphalt from his distant parking spot, still looking angry. Meanwhile, I finished my shopping in air-conditioned comfort and was back to my car in 5 minutes. When I was pulling out of the spot to leave, the same guy was coming out of the store, sweaty and irritated, just in time to watch me drive past him with a wave. He'd spent more energy arguing about the spot than he would have just walking from a farther space in the first place. I'm 32 years old and this is my second pregnancy. My first daughter is now 5, and after years of trying, my husband and I were thrilled to find out we were expecting another baby. This pregnancy has been pretty smooth overall, though these last few weeks have been exhausting. At 38 weeks and 3 days along, I'm basically a walking beach ball who can barely see my own feet. Yesterday was one of those days where I had to drag myself to the supermarket because we were completely out of everything. My husband offered to go, but he always forgets half the list and comes back with random stuff we don't need. So despite feeling like I was carrying a bowling ball in my belly, I waddled my way to the store. I was doing pretty well, taking my time and using the shopping cart as support. The baby has been pretty active lately, which my doctor says is a good sign, but it also means she's constantly pressing on my bladder and ribs. When I got to the checkout, I was ready to go home and put my feet up. The line wasn't too long and I started unloading my cart onto the conveyor belt. That's when this older couple got in line behind me. The woman looked to be in her 60s, well dressed with perfectly styled gray hair. Her husband seemed nice enough, just quietly standing there while she looked me up and down with this big smile. The woman commented loudly about how I looked ready to pop. I get this comment a lot these days, so I'm used to it. People love to comment on pregnant women's bodies for some reason. I told her politely that I had about a week left. She got excited and asked if I knew what the baby was yet. I told her it was a little girl. The woman's face lit up like I'd just told her she'd won the lottery. She demanded that I tell her the name, not really asking but ordering me to share it. This caught me off guard. My husband and I had decided early on that we wanted to keep the name private until after she was born. We did the same thing with our first daughter, and it worked out great. People can't argue with your choice once the baby is already here and named. I politely told her that I wasn't telling anyone the name until after the baby was born. The woman's smile completely disappeared. Her whole demeanor changed in an instant. She told me angrily that it wasn't fair and that I had to tell her the name. I blinked at her, thinking I must have misheard. This complete stranger was telling me I had to tell her my unborn daughter's name. I repeated that nobody was getting to know yet, trying to keep my voice light. I was starting to feel uncomfortable. The cashier had started scanning my items, and I was hoping this conversation would just end. The woman raised her voice and insisted again that it didn't matter, and I had to tell her because she might never see me again. She was getting louder now, and other people in line were starting to look. I felt my face getting hot with embarrassment. Here I was, hugely pregnant and tired, being yelled at by a stranger over something that was absolutely none of her business. I looked at her husband, hoping he might step in and calm her down, but he just looked mortified and was staring at the floor. No help there. I tried to inject some humor into the situation by suggesting that, if she did see me again, it would be after the baby was born so she could ask the baby what her name was. The woman pointed out that the baby wouldn't be able to tell her because babies can't talk. I simply told her that neither would I. At this point, I turned back to the cashier and focused on paying for my groceries. I could feel the woman still staring at me, but I wasn't going to engage anymore. The cashier was trying to pretend nothing was happening, but I could see she was uncomfortable too. When I was gathering my bags, I heard the woman complaining to her husband about how rude young people are these days, and how selfish it was to keep a baby's name secret. Her husband quietly told her to drop it, but she kept going. The woman complained loudly that she just didn't understand why people had to be so secretive about everything, claiming it was just a name. That's when I'd had enough. I turned around one more time and told her she was right, that it was just a name, so there was no reason for her to be upset about not knowing it. The woman's mouth dropped open like I'd slapped her. Her husband actually smiled a little bit at that, which made me feel better. I walked away quickly, but I could still hear her complaining behind me. When I was loading my groceries into my car, I saw them come out of the store. She was still talking animatedly to her poor husband, probably still going on about my terrible rudeness. The whole thing was so bizarre that I actually started laughing once I got in my car. Here was this woman, a complete stranger, who genuinely believed she had some kind of right to know my baby's name. Not only that, but she was angry, actually angry, that I wouldn't tell her. I mean, even if I was planning to tell people the name, why would I tell a random person at the grocery store before telling my own family and friends? The entitlement was just mind-boggling. When I got home and told my husband about it, he couldn't believe it either. He joked that maybe we should have business cards made up with a message about the name being classified information just for situations like this. But honestly, it made me even more glad that we decided to keep the name private. If people are this pushy with strangers, imagine how they'd be if they actually knew us and disagreed with our choice. The funny thing is, this woman was so convinced that she deserved to know that she couldn't even comprehend why I would say no. In her mind, I was being mean to her personally by keeping it private, like my pregnancy and my baby were somehow public property that she had a stake in. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.